Cooling. It's in your PC, your fridge, your PS5 that sounds like a jet engine, if you even have one and you're not broke like me. It's in that phone or that TV you're watching this on right now. But you're here for one reason: car cooling. Not how to do a low taper fade. Yeah, that joke was kind of corny, my bad. One thing before we get into this, though. I got a fun fact for those of y'all who might be wondering what actually happens if a car has no cooling system. Your engine burns fuel thousands of times per minute. Every single combustion cycle produces heat. We're talking over 2,000 degrees inside the combustion chamber. If nothing manages that heat, the metal starts to warp, the oil breaks down, and parts that are not supposed to touch start touching. That's when things get expensive. The cooling system's whole job is to keep the engine in a temperature range where none of that happens. Now, let's get into the main stuff. Air cooling. This is the OG, the one that started it all. No radiator, no coolant, no hoses, nothing. Just the engine sitting out in the open like it's sunbathing, covered in metal fins. The fins are there to create more surface area. More surface area equals more air touching the engine equals more heat leaving. That's literally the whole system. Air hits the fins, heat disappears. Done. And honestly, for a long time, this was good enough. The old Volkswagen Beetle ran on air cooling. That thing had a flat 4 in the back with a fan pushing air over it and no radiator in sight. Millions of those little cars got sold. Porsche used air cooling on the 911 for decades. The air-cooled 911 is still one of the most legendary cars ever made. People pay stupid money for them now. Motorcycles still use air cooling a lot. Most Harley-Davidsons are air-cooled. If you look at a motorcycle engine and you see those big chunky fins sticking out, that's air cooling doing its job right in your face. No mystery, just pure mechanical swagger. So why did we stop using it? Because it has one massive problem. It only works when air is actually moving. If you're sitting in traffic on a 40 degrees Celsius day and nothing is flowing over the engine, it just sits there getting angrier and angrier. Some air-cooled engines have a tiny fan to help. Air-cooled engines also run hotter than liquid-cooled ones. Hotter engine equals louder, thirstier on fuel, and the oil breaks down faster. Plus, the cooling is uneven as hell. One side of the cylinder is chilling, the other side is cooking. Porsche finally killed air cooling on the 911 in 1998. That was pretty much the end of it for performance cars, and Porsche fans lost their minds. To this day, there are guys who swear the real 911 died in '98, and everything after is just a water-cooled imposter. That's how serious air cooling culture is. It had a good run, though. Rest in peace, King. Liquid cooling. This is what your car uses. Like right now. Whatever you drive, unless it's something ancient or built by a madman in his garage, it's liquid cooled. This is the default setting for modern life. Here's how it works. Inside your engine block, there are these small passages called water jackets. A mix of water and antifreeze gets pumped through them by the water pump. As the liquid flows around all the hot bits, it soaks up the heat like a sponge that actually does something useful. Quick note on the coolant mix. It's not just water, bro. It's usually a 50-50 mix with antifreeze. The antifreeze lowers the freezing point so it doesn't turn into a block of ice and crack your engine in winter, and raises the boiling point so it can handle actual heat. Some geniuses still think they can just run straight water to save money. Yeah, you can, until the first cold night when your engine block turns into modern art, or it corrodes from the inside. Don't be that guy. Then the hot liquid goes through a hose to the radiator at the front of the car, behind the grille. It's basically a big flat grid of tiny tubes with fins. Air flows through it and yanks the heat out of the liquid. Cooled liquid goes back to the engine. Repeat forever. There's also a thermostat. When the engine's cold, it stays closed so the coolant doesn't circulate, letting the engine warm up properly instead of being a lukewarm disappointment. Once it hits temp, it opens up and the party starts. If it gets too hot, the electric fan kicks in like, "I got you, bro." One thing most people don't know. The whole system is pressurized. That radiator cap isn't just a lid, it's a pressure valve. The system runs at about 15 psi, which raises the boiling point so the coolant can absorb way more heat. And if you crack that cap while the engine's hot, congratulations, you just gave yourself a coolant facial. Seriously, don't touch it. Let it cool down unless you enjoy second-degree burns and regret. Liquid cooling works so well that basically every car company uses it. Toyota, BMW, Honda, Ferrari, Lamborghini, trucks. If it has an engine and was made in the last 25 years, it's liquid cooled. The trade-off? There's way more stuff that can break. Water pump, thermostat, radiator, hoses, reservoir, fan. Coolant leaks are basically guaranteed at some point. And if your water pump dies on the highway and you don't notice, say goodbye to your head gasket. That's an expensive repair bill. And the worst part is most guys don't even think about this stuff when buying a car. They see the price, the horsepower, maybe the color, and whip out the wallet. Nobody actually sits down and runs the math on what that car costs them over the next 3 to 5 years. Fuel, insurance, maintenance, depreciation, all of it. And then 6 months in, they're staring at a $1,400 water pump bill going, how did I not see this coming? That's why I built the Car Buyer's War Room. You plug in any car, it shows you the real cost of owning it, not the fantasy number the dealer quoted you. You can compare up to 3 cars side by side so you're not guessing which one actually fits your budget. There's a negotiation calculator that spits out your opening offer, your target price, and the exact number where you walk away. And there's a 28-point inspection checklist you pull up on your phone when you go see a used car, so you don't drive home with someone else's problem. Links in the description. You also have to flush and replace the coolant every 30 to 50,000 miles. Most people forget this because nobody thinks about coolant until something goes wrong. Oil cooling. This one always trips people up because every engine already has oil in it. So what makes an oil-cooled engine different? In a normal engine, oil is just there for lubrication, keeping metal from grinding on metal. It picks up some heat as a side quest, but that's not its main job. In an oil-cooled setup, the oil is pulling double duty, lube plus cooling. The engine pumps the oil through an external oil cooler that looks like a baby radiator. Air flows over it, cools the oil down, and sends it back in. You see this a lot on motorcycles that are too hot for pure air cooling, but don't want the weight and drama of a full liquid system. It's the middle child of cooling methods. It also shows up as an add-on on high-performance cars. Stuff like the BMW M3 and Nissan GT-R have dedicated oil coolers. When you're hammering an engine at high RPMs on track, oil temps go nuclear. Hot oil gets thin. Thin oil doesn't lubricate well. More friction equals more heat equals sad engine noises. That's why a lot of track guys add aftermarket oil coolers. Factory liquid cooling is fine for grocery runs, but 20 minutes of hard lapping and your oil turns into burnt coffee that smells like regret and has the consistency of water. At that point, you're basically running metal on metal and praying. Oil cooling by itself isn't as good as liquid, though. Oil only absorbs about half the heat that water can, so for big power builds, it's not enough on its own. Bonus round. Those are the main 3, but 2 more are worth knowing about. Intercooling. If your car has a turbo, the air getting rammed into the engine gets compressed, and compressed air is hot air. We're talking up to 250 degrees coming out of the turbo. Hot air is less dense, less oxygen, less power. An intercooler sits between the turbo and the engine and cools that charged air down. Temps can drop over 100 degrees. Cooler air equals denser air equals more power. This is why tuners obsess over bigger intercoolers like it's their personality trait. There are air-to-air intercoolers, uses outside air, and air-to-water ones, uses coolant. Most street cars run air-to-air. Race cars and rich boy builds usually go air-to-water because it's more effective. And then there's EV battery cooling. Electric cars don't burn fuel, but they still make heat from the battery, motors, and electronics, especially during fast charging. Plug into a DC fast charger, and you're shoving stupid amounts of energy in there quick. That creates a ton of heat. If the battery gets too hot, the car starts throttling the charge speed. That's why some EVs rip for the first 20 minutes, then crawl. Tesla runs liquid coolant through channels in the battery pack to keep every cell at the same temperature. If one area runs hotter, the cells degrade unevenly, and your expensive battery dies faster. Porsche does the same on the Taycan. Battery cooling even has to heat the pack in cold weather because lithium-ion batteries hate being cold. So it's a cooling and heating system in one. Fancy. So that's every cooling system your car might have. Air cooling, simple but dramatic. Liquid cooling, what everything actually uses. Oil cooling, the middle ground. And intercoolers plus battery cooling for the modern stuff. And remember, if you're buying a car anytime soon, the war room is in the description. Run your numbers before you sign anything. If this helped, drop a like. Subscribe if you haven't. I'll see you in the next one.